Hey class, Dave DeRocher out here in Nashville, Tennessee in my backyard in front of a volleyball net because I love volleyball and the inside of my house is too noisy with 4 kids. So I came out here and I hope you can hear me well. Dr. Kimball, thank you for this video blog questions that you gave us. I thought they were really good. They made me dig and ask myself questions. And I even talked to my wife about a lot of these issues this morning. So we had a good conversation. The first question you ask, and every coach has to have a clipboard. So here's the questions. What did the ACA Code of Ethics say about managing boundaries in professional relationships? The ACA says a lot, actually. I would just break it down and summarize in a couple points. 8.5 and 8.6. 8.5 is about the prohibited relationships. 8.6, managing and extending the boundary lines of those relationships of when it's appropriate. So the prohibited side, I think you know a lot of these, but we just got to be very careful. Anything, no sexual relationships at all. No counseling people that you've had any sexual relationship or romantic relationship before. And no sexual relationship with a client until 5 years has passed. So in the article that you had us read from Molesky, there was a 2-year period they talked about, but I guess they've upped it another 3 years. So you got to wait 5 years if that is just to be appropriate. And then even in that documentation, I'm sure has to happen. And you got to make sure you're way above reproach on that. The other prohibited is friends and family. They don't want you counseling friends or family, and no personal virtual relationships with current clients. In other words, you can't have relationships on social media with clients. That's a big no-no. So that's a new thing they've had to add to it. Very important. The other side, 8.6, is all about managing these relationships and extending the boundary lines. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we answer the next couple questions. But essentially, the client's best interest is always paramount. We're in a fiduciary relationship. They have we want them to always know that they're the most important, and we will serve them. It's not about us basically in any way manipulating or exploiting. The ACA says when counselors accept these clients, ones they've known before, maybe from church or from a professional committee or something that they've known before, when a counselor accepts these clients, they have to take appropriate professional precautions such as informed consent. They have consultation themselves to make sure they're doing the right thing, supervision, and documentation to ensure judgment is not impaired and exploitation does not occur. So very important. You can counsel some people from the past or people you've known before with very careful approach to that. So I think that's very important to know. Extending the counseling boundaries when you can is good. And I think that we'll talk about that in the next question, which you say, if you're in a small community, what do? You're not in a huge city where there's an anonymous meeting and you'll never see the person maybe again, like in Los Angeles. But let's say you're in the middle of Tennessee somewhere in a small town, and what do? You're at the local store. You see these people around town. One of the things that they talked about in the Molesky article is they said, you know what, it's really actually very important to get the trust of the population. And in many small communities, it is the well-earned trust of the population that will enable the therapist to effectively serve that community. Meaning, it's okay to have some dual relationships in a smaller area. And I think that's very important. I think you want to be able to have some type of that you're a normal person. You're not just some weird counselor that's the quote shrink or whatever they might call you. I don't know what the terms would be for a counselor, but you want to be careful that you don't come off that way. Matter of fact, in the article, it really caught my attention because it said counselors, and this is for young men, which I thought was interesting, counselors should seek out restaurants, parks, gymnasiums, and non-threatening settings for young males who are used to developing intimate relationships in less formal settings. I thought that was really interesting. That's in other words, if I went to go, say, hey guys, we're gonna have a volleyball tournament this weekend, and some of the clients that I have worked with are there in a small town, that's not bad. That's actually okay. Because you're actually helping the community, you're helping the profession of a counselor, you're building trust. which is probably one of the most important things to do. So, got to get some Gatorade. Hang on. I will say this, as I read the article from Molesky, the most important one I read was just the balance. On one side, you got these extreme examples of, people that may have had sexual relationships with their clients. They used a stat that 10% of psychologists, up to 10% of counselors and people in the field of mental health have had sex with their clients. Obviously, that's crazy. So as a rule, the ACA comes in and really clamps down on anything remotely close to a sexual immorality with the client. But then you got the other side that they're trying to make sure you have the balance and go, well, you can't be so strict and so in a corner and so in a hole that you can't relate to people that are out in the community. And so it's a real balance, and that's where you have to learn how to extend those boundary lines at the right time with the client's best interest, and it's therapeutic to them. So, all right, the last question you asked, if you're planning a practice in a church setting, especially one where you attend and see the clients who attend, what do you need to be aware of when considering a dual relationship? And I think once again, as I read through that, it goes back to A.6a, previous relationships, or learning how to work with people that are in your sphere. I think it can be done if it's done with a lot of documentation, with informed consent, where you're very clear about what that relationship, the boundaries of it are, and start very carefully and slowly before you even step into that relationship. I'd have a lot of colleagues and supervisors to understand, is this a good person to counsel, as well as even contacting the ACA to make sure they may have some examples of how it's worked well, and maybe examples of how it hasn't worked well, so you can learn from them. So that's hopefully that answers the questions well. I learned a ton. Thank you, Dr. Kimball and Melissa, for all the hard work, and all my classmates. I really appreciate all the video blogs. That's it from here in Nashville. Be strong in your code of ethics, and I'm going to slam a volleyball down, because when you're at a volleyball court, that's what we do.